What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in and watching the TIPA trailer rehab, because there's going to be a lot of rehab that's, I think, is going to be needed on this trailer. So I don't have Marianne with me right now because I'm going through and just kind of visually inspecting all the different components. So far from what I've been seeing is along the front corner sections of the trailer, there's a lot of warning signs that I'm picking up on. I'm seeing screws that are tacked in just randomly, probably to hold the siding down. I'm seeing tears in the siding itself. I'm seeing places where there was holes put in and then plugged with silicone or whatever they used. More screws, more loose screws. It looks like a barrage of screws went into the trim and everything along those lines. And big dents. As you can see, the battery compartments are actually pushing up against the siding, which is causing a lot of rubbing and stuff like that. The siding doesn't feel fully secured at all in the front of it. And walking around the whole thing, I'm seeing that the back support brace that holds the tire on has rusted out at a certain point, and there's actually a lot of hornets that are going inside of the frame and making their little nests and stuff, so all that's going to have to be filled in or possibly replaced or repaired somehow at a weld shop or something, I'm not sure. Took a closer look at the spare tire that was on the back, and you could actually see fabric, like the tire was used and they just had it retreaded. And judging from the looks of it, I don't feel 100% comfortable that if I was in a situation where I had to put a new tire on, I don't know if that tire would even last 5 miles. It kind of looks like something that would blow out on you at the worst possible moment. So the more and more I look at this siding, the more and more I realize that it needs just to all be replaced, because with all the holes in it, with the tears in it, with the random screws sticking into it, there's actually one spot that I found on the driver's side where there's actually 2 screws sticking out of the wall, and that is actually 2 screws that is holding the electrical outlet in place. So whoever decided to put 2 screws into it chose screws that were way too long, and it went right through the side of the trailer. So attention to detail, folks. Make sure that the screws that you're using aren't longer than the wall you're screwing into. So the more and more I look at it, the siding definitely needs to be replaced. Definitely on 3 sides at least, because the front is mashed up, holes all over it, not lining up. There's a section where it doesn't even look like it's slid into the section up above it. The sides look like they're just way too short, and so there's a big gap where they try to fill it in with just whatever they could find, it looks like. So I'm not super confident about that. And we did check the brake lights and the marker lights and everything like that, but they are so dim that unless it was pitch black, you probably wouldn't even be able to tell they were on. So, I mean, the lights have to be replaced. I'm going to have to check the wiring to make sure that there's no cuts or issues going on with the wiring. So, a lot of that is going to be a bigger undertaking. It did rain quite a bit yesterday, and so I decided to come out and take a look at it and see if I could see any obvious wet sections within the trailer. I really didn't see anything that was super obvious, but I think it's a little bit different when the trailer's sitting stationary when it rains versus when you're going down the road 60, 70 miles an hour, because that water will actually hit sideways instead of just falling down, and then it'll really get inside there. And with the way the front end looks, I have a feeling like a lot of water would get in between the walls and trickle down to the flooring. possibly causing a lot of rot. I know that the gentleman we got the trailer from said that he redid the front end, and if he did, I don't know how much of it he actually replaced versus just putting new paneling up. And the siding and everything else doesn't fit, so I'm thinking he used boards that were just way too thick, everything pushed out a little bit further, the siding didn't line up right, so he just kind of put it together the best he could and tried to seal the hell out of it. But it looks like crap, and I do not have the confidence that it's actually sealed, keeping water out of inside the trailer. So going around doing the visual inspection is showing me a lot of the obvious stuff, but I think there's a lot more happening inside the walls that I can't see yet. And so it's kind of hard to plan ahead for that element of it. So it's pretty much just expect for the worst and hope for the best. Because if the framing is good and it just needs new insulation, new panels put on, cut, trimmed, and everything and sealed correctly, that would be ideal. If I don't have to actually replace an entire wall. Because these walls are not very thick. They use very thin pieces of wood. And I think it's like 1.5 to 1.75 inches roughly. That holds this whole thing together. So it's like hauling a box of popsicle sticks held together with a silly putty. It's kind of like what it feels like. And I don't mean just this trailer, I mean trailers in general, because they just, yeah. I mean, they deal with a lot of vibration, they deal with a lot of different humidity and moisture issues, things like that, inside and out. And you could tell a lot of the components in here are still really old. I mean, that furnace, I couldn't tell you how old it was, but knowing that the trailer's 30 years old, it's quite likely that furnace is 30 years old too. So coming inside, I did a little walkthrough, and I'll actually walk you through again with me so you can kind of see what I'm looking at. So come on. Over here though, it does look like there's definitely been water damage at some point on the roof. But these new boards, I really don't see signs of the moisture coming through. So I'm not really too sure if it's still leaking up there or not, but knowing how it looks on the outside, I wouldn't be surprised if it was leaking. And again, these lights, they have to go. They're just way too hot, and they're melting through the bulb. And so obviously they probably used the wrong wattage of bulbs when they replaced them. But switching all that to LED won't be a big deal. Down here on the corner, at first I thought this was all wet, but it was whatever sealant that was used. And if you could see down inside of there, see this gap right here? I don't think there should be a big enough gap to fit my finger in. So that's another indication. I think this wall was put out too far. And whatever wood he used here was probably just way too thick, and he just kind of went overkill on it. It's just my assumption. I'm not sure what all the black stuff is. I don't know if that's mold or if that's just from when he was putting it together. But it does raise obvious concerns. Over on this side, similar thing. See a lot of that black stuff going on. You know, definitely had it stapled, definitely sealed between the seams. This sits a lot closer together, so see, I can't get my finger in here. So that makes me wonder if the entire front wall is not even squared. That makes me think that the whole wall is pushed out over on the other side, which is a problem. So that needs to be addressed. Things like this, I mean, I don't know if he just put this panel somewhere where there wasn't really a good seam for him to attach the two sides together. But that should be sitting flat, in my opinion. But it's not. So stuff like that I think definitely needs to be replaced, repaired, whatever. And here's another section here where there's no seam to actually hold the two sides together where we did it. So he tried to put sealant on, but it obviously didn't hold. So yeah, that's another concern going on. Another thing I was doing too is I was walking around just inspecting the ceiling, because you can see a lot of old water damage that took place. None of it feels wet, so I don't know if it's still leaking or not, or if it just hasn't made it all the way through. This cabinet here, it's kind of hard to see with the camera, but you could tell that there was actually water damage on here because it's all warped and ripply and stuff like that. So that's not a good sign. Again, I can't tell if these are new or old, but they don't feel wet. It still feels really dry. But I'm not 100% convinced that there's not water happening somewhere, coming through somewhere up there. Right there, you could tell there was more water damage. Don't know if that was addressed. You could see here, looks like there was water damage as well, but it's dry, so I don't know how old or new it is. Man, that one's not too bad. Once you start seeing enough of it, it's a raise for concern. So a lot of this paneling up here, I believe, probably just needs all to be pulled out and replaced, so I could inspect what's underneath of it as well. That right there is definitely not good. So again, it feels dry, so it might be old, that was repaired, but I can't leave it that way. I mean, even though it's inside of a cabinet, I can't leave it that way, even inside of a cabinet. So it looks like most of the paneling is definitely going to have to be removed, and then take a look at what's happening inside the wall to determine how much more work it's going to take. The two screws I showed you earlier that were sticking out the side of the trailer, that was from this. So whoever decided to screw that down used screws that were way too long and right out the side. I mean, that's just lack of paying attention is all it is. And then to leave them afterwards, they either didn't realize they did it or they didn't care at that point. Some old water damage up here. You know, all over the roof. We're still seeing all this stuff. It's dry, none of it's wet, but it may just because the water hasn't gotten all the way through yet. Again, so yeah. So then my initial assessment, or my initial guesstimate on what's going to have to happen is I'm definitely going to have to pick up new siding. The electrical, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 lights I got to replace with low profile LED lights. So they will be a little bit brighter, they'll be more out of the way, and they won't melt the plastic. That's just no good. And then once I get in a little bit further, take a look at the electrical. That'll tell me if I have to replace a lot of the electrical lines or if they're still in good shape. There's no telling. And kind of go from there. So again, first assessment is new siding with primer and paint, electrical lights, possibly do some reframing to the front end because it looks like this side pushes out further than this side over here. It's either that or he just cut that panel funny. But the way it looks from the outside, it looks like that whole wall is pushed out too far. So whatever it's going to take to fix that. And then getting a lot of the paneling for the inside to replace all the spots where it looks stained and whatnot, because I could probably just repaint it, but some of it seems like it's getting flaky and getting kind of just ruined because it got wet at some point. I don't know when, but at some point it got wet. So replace all the paneling. Initial assessment, kind of showing you what's going on, what I'm seeing, and kind of getting an idea of a starting point for the materials I'm going to have to acquire somehow. We just need a viral video on our main channel. But yeah, if you guys spotted anything, if you guys have resources to get lumber or siding or anything like that, drop a comment below, help me out, because I have a feeling as soon as I start tearing into this, it's going to turn into a project that's going to take a while. And so I just want to have as much of the materials ahead of time so I'm not stalling out halfway through it and having to save up money to go buy flag bolts or something silly. So thanks for tuning into this episode where we evaluate what we're working with and what we're dealing with. And I'll see you soon. Bye.